is an expert on missiles. He worked at the White Sands Proving Grounds for a number of years, and he's going to be one of our people on the panel. I'll be working with the two of them, and we're going to cover some aspects of intelligence and also some aspects of what we might be able to expect to happen in the United States in the next few months. We hope that you'll find it interesting, and I'm sure that we'll have some time for some question and answers when we get done. Bob, would you take over here, please?
Thank you, Jack. I'd just like to say this. You know, I was asked by Jack, I guess a couple of months ago, if I would come down here to this conference and moderate a conference that we had last year out at New Mexico on survival techniques, tactics, and so on. And I said I'd be glad to do it. I just learned this afternoon one of the reasons why maybe I was invited. Jack says, you know, you're going to be the moderator, and you're probably going to have to stand up most of the time. So now I understand why I was invited here. But I am really delighted to be here, and between Jack and Earl, you've got two men that are extremely competent on all the details of survival. But I hope I can make a little contribution. I've been very much impressed, as I'm sure you have been, with the dedication and the knowledge of your speakers and the leaders of this conference. You've been exhorted to work and fight for our constitutional form of government, for our very lives, you might say. And this conference, though, that we're going to talk about now, is one on survival. Because, you know, dead workers, dead soldiers can't serve very well. So it's extremely important that you folks know how to survive, regardless of the disasters that may face you in the future, or the disastrous situations that may face you. You know, in the military, one of the most important factors, one of the most important principles of warfare is what we call the principle of mass or concentration. And I think that this is something that all of you ought to think about as you leave here. You're probably going back to about 79 different cities or towns, and many of you, sooner or later, are going to be faced with some pretty serious situations in your own communities. And I think you ought to begin to think about the application of this principle. Now, you know, and it could apply both in a political life as well as in military life. In time of war, you may be outnumbered by the enemy, but you still have this basic principle of war to fall back on, the concentration of force. If you can find a weak point in the enemy line, and you can mass your forces and your firepower on that one point, it's pretty sure that you can overrun him and destroy him in that particular location. And then you can find another spot and move on from there. This is concentration of force. Now, when you go back to your hometowns, you're going to be facing problems, and you need people that are going to support you. We have to be thinking in this whole movement how we can support each other in all the many problems that are going to arise. We're spread out initially so widely that this is a real problem. But unless we meet that problem, we're going to be very much on the defensive. And of course, the force that's on the defensive, whether it's political or military, is really in a tough spot. I guess the only place where a defensive force can make out effectively is in a guerrilla warfare situation, because there you strike and you then retreat after you've done your damage. This isn't a bad tactic, not a bad way to win a war either in the long run, if you've got the patience and you know how to do it. This is the way Mao conquered the whole of the Chinese nation, the most populous nation in the world. Initially, Mao and his communists never fought a pitched battle to the end. All they did was hit and run. Now, in the course of this kind of a war, a very important part of the war are the many, many civilians that make possible the very existence of that guerrilla strike force. And that's why I say that in this kind of a movement, we must have all of you folks with us, whether you're old or young, whether you ever think you'll carry a rifle or not, you can be very, very valuable if you form a part of what Mao called the warm and friendly waters of the civilian population. He likened a nation at war to a big pond with a... Excuse me just a minute. Sure.
There's a green Dodge van with a Wisconsin license right back in the back of the building that we need moved as soon as possible. If there's anybody here that has the keys to that van, would you please move it just as soon as possible? Green Dodge van with a Wisconsin license. We need to get it out of there as soon as possible. Thank you, sir. Might have known it was you, Ray.
Mao likened a wartime situation, a guerrilla wartime situation, to a big pond with a lot of fish swimming around. And he said the pond are the civilian population. And if the waters are warm and hospitable, those fish can circle around and they can do their job, whatever it may be. But if that pond, if the civilian people that those guerrillas have to live in is not warm and friendly, there can be no successful guerrilla warfare. There can be no successful victory in the end for guerrilla forces. Now, actually, we haven't gone that far yet, and you can aspire, however, to be ready to sacrifice to the extent it's necessary. Now, we'd like to try to suggest to you that some of the dangerous scenarios that you might face in the near future. And here again, we're talking about a very important principle, I think. It's not listed as a principle of war, but I think it's a very important one to consider, and that's the laws of probability. We're trying to develop scenarios which we will be prepared to confront, and we are fully cognizant of the fact that if we talk about nuclear war, we may be talking about a probability of 10 or 20 or 30%. You can pick out your own percentage if you want. We don't agree among ourselves. But the point is, it is a real possibility and it can occur, but there are other possibilities also. So we're involved in trying to protect ourselves in a number of different scenarios. Earl Jones here has probably more experience in visualizing and taking action and thought in the areas of prevention and protection in nuclear war situations than the rest of us. He's probably more concerned about that. Jack Mohr, on the other hand, visualizes a greater probability of other things happening, and he's going to be addressing those with, I think, the greatest attention. Now, just before I close here, I'd like to point out a couple of things to you. Quite a while ago, there was a study made by several men down at the Oak Ridge Laboratories in Tennessee, where I come from, on nuclear war survival skills. And as a result of that, a terrific manual was put out, which I have recommended many times in the past. In fact, I bought it for a lot of my friends so that they could take appropriate steps to protect themselves from this eventuality. Since I've been here, I've been delighted to meet a fellow by the name of Tom Neiman, who has, I learned soon after the publication of this nuclear war survival skills, has come out with another manual called Better Read Than Dead. Now, you probably heard this better read than dead motto before, and it's been a very bad, destructive one, the way it initially came out, because they spelled that read R-E-D. But the way Tom Neiman spells it, as the title of his book is R-E-A-D. In other words, better read this book than be dead. And there's a certain amount of truth in this, because this book of his is an excellent one. It almost supersedes the nuclear war survival skills. It covers a lot of people that don't want to put in quite as much advanced preparation as you would have to do if you were to try to follow the recommended procedures in this. This is excellent. It's still good, but it requires a little more effort on your part than his procedural steps would do. So I recommend that sooner or later every family here get at least a copy of this book from Tom Neiman. It is excellent. He has a stand outside, and if he can't furnish you a book now, I think he could arrange to mail it to you. Now, if I had a minute more, Jack, do I have 2 minutes more? I'd just like to say this. We talked here Friday night about nuclear strategy, the United States American nuclear strategy, and how inadequate it was. One of the reasons it was inadequate, in my opinion, and on the opinion of anybody that studied this, is because we effectively have no real civil defense. Now, what we're going to be talking about today is civil defense. This is supposed to have been the responsibility of the federal government to lead and direct us this way, but they've done really nothing. The little bit they've done can seriously be questioned as being possibly worth less than nothing. So you have to get this book or something equivalent to it, and I know only these two books. With those few words, I'd like to turn it over now to you, Jack, and let you pick it up.
Thank you, Bob. You'll hear some more of him do before we get done. I want to talk to you for just a little bit this afternoon about a concept of intelligence that most of you haven't heard about. You haven't read about it in your newspapers. It certainly hasn't come over the TV news. But we have some sources of information that have proven down through the years to be very reliable. Some of these are ex-CIA or FBI men that were disgusted with what they saw the government doing in the line of intelligence and got out and went into sort of an underground intelligence, if you'd like to call it that. But they still have connections with some of the highest ranking intelligence apparatus around the country and in the world. And some of these fellows are just men that have been in this field for a long period of time and have realized that it's necessary for the American people to know the truth. Then there's a very interesting thing that has happened in the last few years, and that is that quite a number of high-ranking military men who are up in the general rank, in the general's rank, in both of all of the military service, who realize that the American people have the right to know, and they have stuck their neck out on the line and have given us information that would very possibly get them court-martialed and thrown into Leavenworth if the word got out. So you see, we have to be very careful about protecting our sources of information, so please don't ask me where I got this information, because I don't particularly care whether you believe it or not. I'm just passing it out for what it's worth, and to tell you that it is coming from sources that have been reliable in the past, and that there are certain patterns that are beginning to shape up. I first became interested in this about 5 years ago, and then about 2 years ago, we began to see a very strange pattern that was beginning to develop in the country. And I want to talk to you for a few minutes about that, and then I would like to present to you a scenario of what I believe might be expected to happen in the United States maybe within the next few months or maybe in the next couple of years. About 2 years ago, people that we had, that we've known for a long period of time along the Mexican border, just west of Brownsville, Texas, gave us this information. They had been on a fishing trip down to Lake Guerrera. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that lake. It's down near Ciudad Victoria in the eastern part of, or northeastern part of Mexico. And Lake Guerrera is noted worldwide for its bass fishing. Many people from the United States go down there bass fishing. And this man had gone down there with a couple of his friends, and the weather had been rather bad. They weren't able to get out on the lake because the winds were high. So his Mexican guide took them into the hills to the west of Lake Guerrero, over towards the city of Ciudad Victoria, to go dove hunting. And one morning as they were going dove hunting, they came up over a little hill, and to their amazement, they heard a great deal of mechanical activity going on the other side of the hill. And as they went up through the brush, to their amazement, they came onto a large plain with many, many armored vehicles in operation. They took pictures of tanks, half-tracks, armored vehicles of all different types, fighter planes, which were obviously Russian MiG fighter planes. All of the vehicles had the red star of Russia on the side of it, and there were men operating the machines, and in among the machines that were in Russian uniform and were identified quite readily as being Russians, even from a distance. They took numerous pictures and brought this back to the United States, and through channels we took this information to the State Department and also to the Pentagon. The Pentagon, as far as we know, never did anything about it. At least we never heard anything from them. But we got a very adverse reaction from the State Department within a short period of time. It said, you had no business being down there, you had no business taking those pictures, and if you spread this information to anybody, you're going to be in trouble. So we started to spread the information around, and immediately we got in trouble. We began to come under harassment from government sources. From that time on, there has been a pattern that has been spread along the Mexican border until at the present time we know of 8 large military complexes within 50 miles of the Mexican-U.S. border, which have a very high concentration of armored vehicles, tanks, guns, planes, and you name it, that would be used in the case of an invasion against the United States. One of them, as I said, is near Ciudad Victoria. Another one of the very largest ones is south of El Paso, down in the Chihuahua area, and another very large one is south of San Diego, about 50 miles from the border. We have had reoccurring reports coming from this area that indicate that at the present time there are at least 2 divisions of armored force. Now these are tank divisions, Russian or Soviet tank divisions that are within 200 miles of the border of the United States, and that they are in what we would call a cadre force. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that term, but a cadre are the nucleus of a division, the men that do the training. They're the ones when the recruits begin to come in that give the training to the recruits. And these armored divisions apparently are not yet filled up with men that will run the machines, but they have a nucleus of Russian advisors that are there that are able to teach them. We have also found out within the last year and a half that there are at least 75,000 Mongolian troops in the Yucatan Peninsula, and at least 50,000 of them that have been moved into Cuba within the last year. Along with this same information, we have found out that there have been large amounts of heavy military equipment that has been moved into the Florida Key area and into the remote areas of Florida. We also know that much of it has been moved up along the Mexican-U.S. border. Now, what has happened in the face of all this as far as our government is concerned? We have one division of armored force, the 4th Infantry Division, or the 4th Armored Division, which is stationed at Fort Hood, Texas, that is supposed to defend the border between the United States and Mexico. And what has happened to the 4th Armored Division in the last 2 years? They have been decreased in number from around 16,000 men to just over 5,500 men. All of their heavy military equipment has been moved out, and there's a great deal of evidence to show that this heavy military equipment has been moved to the Israelis over in Palestine. They have very little military equipment now as far as heavy equipment is concerned at Fort Hood. Also at the same time, the Border Patrol, under both the Carter administration and carried on under the Reagan administration, have been emasculated until today, guarding over 2,000 miles of territory between Mexico and the United States. We have less border patrolmen than they have policemen on the White House in Washington, D.C. Now, I have a friend of mine that owns a ranch in a place called Sassabee, Arizona. This is about, I guess, maybe 80 or 90 miles west of Nogales. It's up in the mountain area, and he has 8 miles of territory that go along the Mexican border. A few years ago, they was having a lot of trouble with the illegals cutting his barbed wire fence. His cattle would get over into old Mexico, and they'd have a terrible time getting back. So a Mexican friend of his suggested something to him. He said, why don't you put a gate in there and put a sign up in Spanish saying, help yourself to the gate, but please close it after you get through. So for the last year and a half, the illegals have been coming through, opening the gate, going on through, leaving notes in Spanish, thank you for letting us use your gate. So what has the Border Patrol done about it? Well, they put a little warning bell on that gate and connected it with an electrical wire to the Border Patrol station that is 5 miles away, so that now when the illegals come through and open the gate, a red light blinks in the office. And what do they do about it? They don't do anything about it, because for the last year and a half, they have been, by government orders, kept down to 25 gallons of gasoline per week for a four-wheel drive vehicle, and they've got 2 of them. And anybody who's ever driven a four-wheel drive vehicle knows you don't go very far in 25 gallons of gasoline. One of them told me that we got just enough to go from our homes down to the station and back again. That's all. And this has been an escalation that has gone on and on. Within recent months, we have had information, for instance, in November of last year, information coming from an investigative reporter in El Paso to the effect that in the late November of last year, between the city of El Paso and Las Cruces, New Mexico, there were 18 illegals picked up with component parts for a nuclear device. He said when we got this information, we immediately wrote up a story. We were going to break it in the morning news all over the United States, and before we could print it, there was word came in from Washington, under no circumstances must this information be leaked to the American people. Nuclear devices in the United States. Not very long ago, we had information from a security policeman on the Southern Pacific running along the Arizona-California or Arizona-Mexican border that they have been picking up illegals that are not coming over looking for work. These are young men. They are in good physical condition. They are carrying large amounts of American money on their person. They have ID cards. They have Social Security cards, American Social Security cards. They have papers that state that they have served in the American Armed Forces, and they are carrying German AK-94 fully automatic weapons with up to 500 rounds of .308 ammunition. And there have been several shootouts in that area. Also in the Del Rio area, I don't know if you're familiar with that in Texas, that's on the east end of the Big Bend, you know, that big bulge that goes out into Mexico. We have had a man who has been living there for about 35 years and who has been a very, very good source of information for at least 5 years. He's part Indian. He looks like a Mexican. He's very dark complected. He speaks 5 Indian dialects, and he speaks Spanish like a native. His occupation is to take hunters out during the deer season. This year he wrote and told us that during the deer season he wasn't able to get any Mexican Americans to act as guides on the north side of the border because of the fact that all the good Mexicans have moved inland at least 200 miles to the north because they feel that something's going to happen along the border. They don't want to be there when it happens. So he said, the way I got men to help me this year, I just took my truck, drove across into old Mexico, loaded up with the Mexicans I could find, brought them back right through the border checkpoint. He said they never even stopped me or asked me what I was doing. He said I kept them there until we got done with the hunting season, then I took them back. Nothing was ever said about it. But he said the interesting part was that when we were, during the hunting season, he said every night after the gringo hunters had gone to bed, we'd sit around the campfire and they would start to talk about what was happening in old Mexico. He said almost without fail, every one of those fellows, and he said these were young men in their 20s and 30s, had been approached by foreigners who they believed to be Russians, who had offered them large amounts of money. Now, in talking about a large amount of money, we're talking about 500 American, which is a lot of money to a Mexican peon, and they had been offered large amounts of money to join a force that is going up into the United States with the primary purpose, the primary mission of splitting the United States in two along the Mississippi River when the time comes. Now, this is not the only place where we've been getting this information. It's come from a number of other places. But one night during the evening, he said there was a colonel, a full colonel from the federales, that's the Mexican National Army, who sat around the campfire, and after having a few drinks of tequila, he said he got quite boastful, and he said, you people are in for a real surprise in the United States, because we're going to take over all of the southwest United States before the end of 1985. You see, that's sort of ridiculous. Well, not very long after that, there was a young fella that runs an organization called the Brown Berets, which is an underground organization made up of Chicanos. He was in Chicago. He made a public speech in Chicago that was recorded in the Chicago Tribune, and here's what he said. He said, all of the southwest United States is going to be a Spanish-speaking country by the end of 1985. At the same time, in the city of Ottawa, Canada, the ambassador from Mexico to Canada made a speech one night after he'd had a few drinks, and he was getting pretty tipsy, and he proposed a toast to the mutual boundary between Canada and Mexico in 1985. Now, you figure that out for yourself. See, all these things, I guess maybe you could call them rumors. I don't know how many of you fellows were in the service, but if you were in the service and you remember when there was a rumor that went on long enough and it kept on and was persistent, you can almost bet your bottom dollar that somewhere in the background there was an inkling of truth that started that rumor. And you see what we are, we're sort of like a man that's out in the woods, we're out hunting, and all of a sudden we smell smoke. Now, we don't know where the fire is, and we don't know how big the fire is, but we know doggone well there's a fire because we can smell it. Well, that's what's happening in the United States. And we are getting literally thousands upon thousands of these reports that are coming from every area of the United States, which indicate that something big is building up. And apparently what it appears to be is that there are, at the present time, about 3 million illegals along the boundary line, which is the Mississippi River. It appears that their mission is, on a given signal, to blow the bridges across the Mississippi River first, and then to spread out from there and cause all the trouble that they can. Some of them have said that we have been given the mission for each one of us to kill 5 gringos and to concentrate upon the village officials and the police officials. In the city of Chicago, about 1 million illegals, the largest concentration in the United States. You go down to the southern end of the Mississippi River, and in the Delta area are the largest concentration of Vietnamese in the United States. According to sources coming from patriotic Vietnamese, they admit that at least half of the 640,000 Vietnamese refugees in the United States today are Viet Cong that are here for the purpose of destroying the United States of America because they're communists. And you know what's happened? Your own government, using your tax dollar, has been giving these people expensive, high-speed fishing boats, some of them that are twin diesels that'll go up to 50 knots an hour, which is more than most of our patrol boats will do, and they are within 5 hours of the Yucatan Peninsula, where there are 75,000 enemy soldiers waiting to get into the United States. Now, you figure out what's going to happen. Now, what would happen if the balloon went up? Well, in the first place, it appears that there are 107 of the big American cities that are earmarked for destruction. This is coming right from the underground themselves. It's coming from the black Muslims. It's coming from the old underground Weatherman organization, coming from the old Students for a Democratic Society. 78 cities last year, 107 cities in 1984. Now, what would happen if the bridges across the Mississippi River were blown? Immediately, within 2 weeks' period of time, you would have riots all along the East Coast because they wouldn't be getting food. The majority of food going out to the East Coast comes through Omaha, Nebraska. If it couldn't get across the Mississippi River, those people would be going hungry within 2 weeks. And you would see rioting out there. Now, my concept is this. I believe this is what we can look forward to if this thing develops to where we have a chaotic condition. I think first we are going to see most of the troops of the United States outside of the continental United States engaged in a war somewhere. Very possibly in 2 areas. Very possibly in the Near East, either in Palestine or else maybe over in the Persian Gulf. Also possibly at the same time in Central America. I'm talking now not only about the Army, I'm talking about the major proportions of the National Guard. Once these men get out of the country, then we are ripe for the blow-up in the big cities. And what's going to happen? The local police cannot handle it. The state police cannot handle it. They admit they can't handle it. And that's one of the reasons why the Christian Patriot Defense League and the Civilian Emergency Defense System was set up, because when that time comes, if it comes, and pray God that it doesn't come, but if it does come, we are going to have to defend our own people, because there's not going to be anybody to defend us. And you're going to find that many of the people on the police force are going to leave the police force because they're going to go home to protect their own families. They're not going to be out there protecting somebody in St. Louis or Kansas City or someplace like that. So what we're having today develop here is a situation in the United States where it appears that our own government, sitting in Washington, D.C., this illegal government that we've talked about, the one that Louis Beam talked so fluently about this afternoon, this illegal government is deliberately bringing in thousands upon thousands and millions of immigrants, over 1 million every month, coming into the United States across the Mexican border alone. And that when this time comes and this thing builds up to a certain point and the balloon goes up, we will see riots breaking out in our major cities, and at the time when that happens, our government has two options open to it. Both of them are bad for us. One of them, the president has available at the present time an executive order in which he can declare a martial law. What would that mean? It means then that the National Guard or the police or whoever were in charge of operations, police operations, could come to your house. They could legally take any weapon you got. They could take your food supply. They could take your medical supply or anything else that they needed on the pretext that it was for the defense of the nation. Supposing that they wouldn't go that far. Supposing that they didn't have the police force to do that. How would you like to have 500,000 Asiatic or third world nations troops in here with the United Nations peacekeeping force? Have you ever stopped to think of that? That the government of the United States said we can't handle the trouble. Let's ask the United Nations to send somebody in to help us. How would you like to have 100,000 or 500,000 people from the black republics in Africa up here patrolling your city street? So you see, folks, we're facing something that's very, very serious. Most people don't realize it. Most people don't realize how far down the drain America has gone and how serious the situation is. Folks, we are not playing Boy Scouts. We are not playing a game. We're in the opening stages of World War III right now. The only thing is the shooting hasn't started yet. But we better get that through our head. And we better get prepared for some awful hard days ahead. And don't you figure that Jesus Christ is going to come back and yank you out of this here either, because you can't find that anywhere in the Word of God. If you believe that, you've been had by the enemy. You better be prepared for some tough times ahead. Now, if you think I like to stand up in front of a group like this and tell you that this country that I love and this country that I fought for and this country that I bled for and the country that a lot of you fellows out there fought and bled for is going down the drain, you're crazy. I don't like it. It scares the daylights out of me, and I don't sleep good when I think about it. But I tell you, my friends, the American people need to know the truth so that we can be prepared to defend ourselves. That's why we're here today. Earl's going to talk about a little bit different aspect of it today, but listen very carefully. We're not up here spreading any propaganda. We're here because we care about you and because we care about the principles of this country of ours and our constitutional form of government. And we love our people, and we want to see our people protected if it's at all possible. We're not making a penny by being up here at all. I tell you, we're not running for public office, so we don't care whether you like us or not. We're not here to win a popularity contest. We're here to give you the truth. And whether you accept it or not, that's between you and God. Don't ever go away from here saying you never heard it before, because you heard it today if you never heard it before. But, Bob, you better take over here before I get carried away, because I start getting angry when I do that, and I lose my temper, and then no telling I might go another 30 or 40 minutes. So,
Jack, we love to listen to you. God bless. Earl Jones is coming up now and talk about another phase of this civil defense.
You know, last summer at church camp down in Mountain Air, Pastor Emery spoke on the 4th of July, first thing in the morning, and Jack followed Pastor Emery, and I followed Jack. The next morning I saw Pastor Emery. I said, you know, he's a hard man to follow. And he says, why do you think I went on first? The odd thing about this is that I'm between a rock and a hard place. This afternoon, I wanted to talk about another aspect of nuclear war survival skills, and this evening, I wanted to continue with what Jack just now told you. I would like to show you a film tonight called No Place to Hide. It was put on the CNN News Network, Turner's Superstation, and I taped it, and we'll have a videotape of that tonight just to kind of warm you up into what is terrorism and what the purpose of terrorism is. And then I would like to tell you some of the things that he has said kind of all over again, and then bring some other things into it and how this will affect you. There's a lot going on in the Southwest today, just as there is a lot going on up and down the Mississippi River. And so you need to know these things to protect yourself. But this afternoon, if I may, I would like to talk about another aspect of survival. First, you've got to understand that surviving any kind of a nuclear exchange is a mental attitude. They have conned you into the concept of better red than dead because of a nuclear holocaust type situation. This is not true. You can survive a nuclear war. What they have given you in the way of scenarios is that it's the worst case condition, one that would pop right straight overhead. The majority of we Americans will not be in that unfortunate position. Even if there was a nuclear attack or a nuclear exchange directly with the United States. Another very probable scenario is that there would be a nuclear exchange somewhere else on a limited basis, somewhere else in the world. It would still affect you and your children and your grandchildren because the nuclear fallout would reach you in a matter of 1 to 2 or 3 days. Evidence of that was back when the Chinese had their dirty bomb tests when they were learning how. And if you'll recall, 2 or 3 days later, everybody worried about the cows becoming contaminated on pasture grass up in Wisconsin and Minnesota and so forth, and they had to take the cattle off, or the cows off the line for milking purposes. So you have a problem with a nuclear exchange that will materially affect you. It would affect you not perhaps this month or next month with an immediate exchange, but would affect you 20, 30 years down the line. It would affect your children more than it would you. It would affect babies unborn the most of all. So no matter what the scenario is, the direct overhead burst, 1 200 miles away, 1 3,000 miles away, or 5 7,000 miles away, you have to get yourself protected. Tom Neiman wrote a wonderful book, recommend it most highly that you obtain it, on the conditions, the scenarios leading up to the type of protection where you have no place to go and you're practically with a backpack. And you just have to walk out. You have no place to protect yourself, no advance warning. It's a last-ditch type stand. Well, this, and then of course he does go into the survival shelters and so forth and does a very good job of it. The Crescent P. Kearney's book, Nuclear War Survival Skills, tells you how to do this with a bare budget. He shows you how you can do this with minimal money, and it doesn't take much. And I would like a little bit to talk about that sometime today, too, because you have to be encouraged into knowing that it is not hopeless. This is the most important thing that I can get across to you. Now, first, as a little bit of a background on myself, I was a missile project engineer for Nike Hercules and Nike Ajax. I was in charge of the engineering test for both of those weapon systems, and the Nike Hercules did carry a nuclear warhead. It also carried two types of conventional warheads. We spent 28 and a half years in that business, and that was the weapon system that we developed. We had 256 batteries protecting the cities of the United States, and it was very, very effective against any air breather threat that the enemy then or even now can put against us. There isn't an aircraft in the air that the Nike Hercules could not have intercepted. Had intercepted at 100 miles distance and at an altitude of 80 to 100,000 feet. Robert Strange McNamara disbanded the system. Mr. McNamara did some other things. Concurrently with this, he did away with all of the civil defense structures. He was playing poker with the lives of 200 plus million American people. He took all of the crackers and the water out. He took the radiation detectors out. He then came up with a concept which was called MAD, Mutually Assured Destruction. It was talked about the other night by Arnie here. Following this, they came up with what was called the Crisis Relocation for America plan. Now really, these acronyms, they're laughing at you. Spell it out. What they have done here now is to plan on relocating people from the large population centers to smaller towns, like Licking here. But they haven't bothered to tell Licking that they are a host. They haven't bothered to tell the people up and down this little road right here that they may have to take care of some black people or yellow people or whatever from Chicago or St. Louis. In this case, it would be probably more apt to be out of Joplin, Springfield, and perhaps as far away as St. Louis, right here. Further, they haven't put any food, water, medicine, clothing, blankets, nothing in Licking, Missouri to be and act as a host to these thousands of people. Further, they have given you automobiles that have transistorized ignition systems that would disallow you to get out of Springfield, Joplin, or St. Louis in the event of another attack with an airburst 50 miles altitude because of this electromagnetic pulse, this EMP that emanates from an airburst on a warhead. So the scenario is very, very sad. We have been cheated. And that's why you're here. They then come along and give you a film on ABC called The Day After. How many of you saw it? Just something with it. There is one thing in all of the discussions following with men like Carl Sagan, an Eskimo, that all of them missed in their points, and this was intentional also. Do you remember the one family, the man who even forced his wife by bodily carrying her down into the shelter in the basement that he hurriedly built? The daughter who was to be married the next day, he carried them down. He survived. Then, of course, they had to turn around and shoot them to prove to you that he wouldn't survive either. But the point was that with a minimal amount of protection, you can survive. Crescent B. Kearney, in his book, shows you how you can, with just your own family and your own backyard, dig a trench and drive your automobile over it, and put sandbags up around the edge and throw some sandbags inside. You want at least 3 feet of dirt over you. That gives you, 3 feet of dirt gives you 1,000 to 1 attenuation. Now obviously, if you have a 1,000 rem equivalent force on the outside of the 3 feet, you're down to 1 rem equivalent on the inside, and your body should only take a total of 200 to 250 rems. So that wouldn't be much good, because you're 250 hours later, you had it. However, that scenario is nigh on impossible. What would be more probable would be a maximum of 1-2 rems radiation. It is enough 20 years down the pike to give you cancer, to give your children cancer, but if you could attenuate that 1,000 to 1, and then armed with the knowledge that you have a decay rate that is asymptotic, it falls almost vertical and then levels out almost horizontal, to the point where within 24 hours you're down another 100 to 1. It decays most rapidly, and so that is going to save your life. Now, we must not think in terms of only going into the hole, whatever that hole may look like. It can be a boarded up side in the basement with sandbags or whatever on the side of it. Minimal expenses. Going into the hole doesn't buy you anything. You've got to think in terms of coming out. What do you do then? That is the situation that the other scenarios that these gentlemen are talking about have to come into play. Now, there are a lot of little examples, things that you can do with truly a bare budget to protect yourself. First and foremost, besides the type of things that Mr. Neiman was talking about, most important, survival with water, food, medicines, and so forth, you have got to have some detection system. If there is an exchange in the Persian Gulf, in Lebanon, in Germany, they would love to put it into Germany, because Germany is earmarked as a nation for total destruction. They would love to do it over there. They want the United States for a spoil, Deuteronomy. My friends, they are already taking the United States for a spoil. Look up and down the roads, even here, you will find some newer homes. Good. There's money owed at the bank on those. Most of the homes that you find in America are homes that have been there for a long time, built with blood, sweat, and tears by the people's parents who are now living in them even. And they're paying the taxes. They're sending the money to Israelis. They can't afford anything better. They're already taking you for a spoil. In Germany, immediately following World War II, we stayed there just long enough for the occupation troops to come in before we could come home. And the Russians came on in, and the occupation forces report that they'd go into the homes and take the toilets out and the mirrors on the wall and the furniture and all that stuff and send it all back to Russia. All of it. Well, they're taking spoil from us in another way. All right, so we can't afford the fancy civil defense systems. But you can, if you can buy a new 870 Remington, you can get a detection system. It's a matter of a lot of priorities. I'm not taking away from the 870 Remington, you understand? That's great. But you've got to put something like an equal amount of money onto a detection system to know when to go into that hole. I don't think you're going to be told. One of the trilateralists, before the crisis relocation plan actually took place in the United States, made a presentation in Washington. And he came up with the brilliant idea that what we needed was to relocate our people in the event of the next emergency, or at the time of the next emergency. Shortly after that, we had the Cambodia-Laos situation. There is ample evidence that that was a dry run. They walked what they report, the Khmer Rouge reports to have killed 1 to 1.5 million, but other intelligence says it is closer to 6 and 7 million. They walked them to death. That's the crisis relocation plan. Balk. Don't buy it. Stay where you are. If you live in a big city, pray about it. Think in terms of at least buying in a bedroom community. Think more in terms of getting out of there. Your family's life, the future of your family, the future of your nation, very well may depend on that in the event of a major exchange. Small cities, like Licking, commute into the larger cities for your jobs. Change your lifestyles. Example of where you can save money. Depending on the size of your family, you can go down to the local junkyard. You may even want several of your families to go together, in which case you go a little bit bigger. But depending upon the size or the number of people you want to protect, go to the local junkyard and buy something between an old, worn-out, beat-up, wrecked van, such as that green Dodge back there, even an automobile. You can buy them for $25. With the wheels out from under it, the frame out from under it, all the guts out of it, all you want is the shell. If that's not big enough, buy 2 of them. If that's not big enough, buy a school bus. You can buy school buses anywhere from $75 to $150. Go down and get the local backhoe operator to dig you a hole. If you have a little bit of extra money, put some concrete over it. If you don't have any extra money, paint some tar on it. Just ordinary old coal roofing tar. Roll some roofing paper over it. Plastic perhaps, big sheet plastic. And backfill the dirt on it. That van would take 3 feet of dirt very easily. Take 4 feet. School buses are curved. Forces of dirt go down at 45 degrees instead of straight down. That pressure is not straight down, it's off at 45 degrees. So you're protected. If you're putting 2 buses together, don't put them side to side where you have a wider span on top. Put them end to end where it's long and narrow, and the forces go down the side of the bus into the dirt rather than on the bus. It'll take 3 feet of dirt. And with tar and paper, it would last, I think, perhaps as long as most of us. Some ample means of getting in and out, some means of air. As Crescent P. Kearney points out, air in a human country is going to be a killer. It takes air. So he developed what is called the Kelly air pump, the CAP. Shows you how to build it, simple. A few pieces of wood, put it together and you can get your pump going. You've got to remember that it's only the particle of dust that floats in the air that gets on you or you breathe that's the killer. If you have a can of tomatoes on the shelf in the pantry, perfectly all right to take the gloves that Tom was talking about, pick up the can of tomatoes, washing it off, opening up the can of tomatoes and eating the tomatoes. It doesn't bother the contents. The same way with water. These are things that they have you misled. If you're close to water, before you put the unit in a hole, go down and get your local, or do it yourself. Drive a well point down. Now you got a great big container of water down there, all you need for your drinking purposes. If you don't have that, develop a system where you can protect your water. If you're on a country, in the country where you have your own well, all you need is power, a little Onan generator to drive the pump to get you the water, just a little ingenuity, a few bucks, and you can survive. But you have to know when it is time to go in that hole. If there's an exchange overseas, 2 to 3 days. Now, I think I've used my 15 minutes, perhaps more. So with that, I'll sit down and we can go on with the program. Tonight, though, I'm going to talk more about on Jack's position and show this film and give you what this means to all of us. Thank you.
Bob, before we start on with the rest, let me say something that along the line of what Earl has just talked about. Has it ever come to your mind that it could be very possible that this program of chaos that I talked about earlier could be brought about by, let's say, the dropping of a small nuclear device that would be used more or less for to frighten the people to where how many people in the United States do you suppose of, say, a 50 kiloton bomb, which is about the size of a Hiroshima bomb, was to go off in Chicago or Kansas City or St. Louis and wipe out a 3 or 4 square mile area of the city? What do you think might be the reaction of the American people? Do you think there might be a great number of American people that might be calling on the president to surrender before any more of the bombs drop? So it's very possible that this nuclear exchange might be a very limited nuclear type of a thing, but it might be used for the same purpose, and that is to bring about the surrender of our people.
Good point.
I want to give you all a chance to ask questions now. I know that there have been so many subjects that have been, so many aspects of this subject that have been discussed that you must have many questions. I'd just like to say this, though, again, that this whole matter of civil defense is not a selfish thing. We pointed out, I believe, Friday night, that civil defense was a very important component of overall nuclear defense. And one of the best ways to avoid a strategic nuclear attack would be if the United States was adequately prepared as far as civil defense is. In other words, if everybody had proper protection from nuclear war, there would be the very much decreased likelihood that it would happen. I've often thought that the government ought to have incentive programs whereby they would give people monetary rewards, tax reduction, what have you, for money that they spend in nuclear protection. As far as I know, that's not so now, but it's still valid, and it's valid even if they don't give you anything, because it's pretty cheap insurance if you can save the lives of your family and friends. Now, we talked about the getting together. There are infinite problems that arise when you start to figure out what you might do yourself in your own personal situation. For example, if you're living in a fairly dense, even suburban area, you start building yourself a nuclear fallout shelter in the backyard. I mean, if you do that, then what's the situation going to be as far as your neighbors are concerned? Are they going to want to pile in there, you know, in the emergency? These are things that you have to discuss and think about. But the point is, you might as well start facing the problems now to figure out what you're going to do and start making some kind of arrangements for it. The first book that I referred to, the Nuclear War Survival Scales, gives a very adequate description and plans on all the various kinds of nuclear fallout shelters that you can build. For example, I would think that they would be ideal for somebody living on a farm. You could build yourself, let's say, 80% at least, or 90% of a nuclear fallout shelter, and use it as a root cellar, you know, until the time came when it looked really imminent to take the last 10% and make a fallout shelter out of it. This is one possibility that has occurred to me. On the other hand, if you're in a city, that's not a possibility. Then you have to think in terms of what you can do to make your house a fairly effective nuclear fallout shelter, or some part of your house. So these are the questions that are addressed by Crescent Carney and Nuclear War Survival Skills, and Tom Neiman, who emphasizes particularly the things that you can do short of a major construction program. In other words, where you're caught almost short without very much advanced preparation and without the expenditure of a lot of time and money and effort building yourself something really, really sound. Still, if you can get 90% protection, or 80% protection, that's a world better than none at all. And that may be the difference between life and death. And now, I'd be glad to field questions for you folks. You can direct them to whoever you want here. Earl Jones, Jack Mohr, or even myself if you want. Any questions? Okay, please speak up. A little louder, please, or come forward.
Repeat the question.
All right, can you hear all right now? All right, I'll repeat the question. All right, let's have a question, please. All right.
For Jack, what about security threats from the north? Canada, Alaska, Mongolia?
Here's a gentleman that wants to know, what about security threats from the north?
I don't speak the English very good, so I have to have a translator up here to translate for me. That's not really true. I'm a little bit hard of hearing, and I stood next to those big guns for too long, so if I can't hear good, I've trained this young fellow here long and arduously and paid him lots of money in order to get to where he can translate for me. So you're interested in what we've done to protect from the north from coming in from Russia? Well, there has been a great deal of concern by the politicians in Alaska because at the present time our radar system, that early warning, what we used to call the DO system, is just about outmoded. Most of the equipment, in fact, is inoperable at the present time, and almost all of the aircraft that we have in Elmendorf Air Force Base and up in Fairbanks are old A4s and A5s. They're old planes that won't match the MiG fighter plane. And there has been very little of modernizing equipment moving up there. We do know that across the Bering Straits for at least 5 years, there has been an invasion force of approximately 2 million Russians who are over there with a very large horse herd. By the way, these are going to be mounted troops. These are specially trained horses that will carry up to 500 pounds of load, plus a rider on their back, and they're trained across very rough country. They have the barges to bring them across the Bering Sea, and they would probably have to be brought across during the winter months when the muskeg is frozen up there, because they wouldn't be able to move either horses or military equipment across that area. Now, the strange thing about all this is we have been told for quite a number of years now that Red China and the Soviet Union are enemies. But the interesting thing is that for the last 2 years there have been 8 divisions of Red Chinese engineers who are supporting these 2 million Russian troops up there and are helping them in their invasion plans. Now, as far as we have been able to find out, that probably one of the initial things that would take place, let's say, for instance, if there was an invasion that came from Cuba, maybe up through Miami, with a base possibly in Miami, and then the Vietnamese coming up through the Gulf, or coming up through the Mississippi River, and then another invasion force coming up from Mexico, we could expect the same time to be hit probably from the northwest. And the initial thing they believe that will happen will be an airborne drop on the Alaska pipeline. There are at the present time 5 brigades of Russian paratroopers across the Bering Strait. So they believe that these would be dropped, probably initially 5 battalions of them would be dropped. This is around 850 men in a battalion. And that would mean around 4,000 of them that would be dropped along the Alaskan pipeline with the idea of completely destroying the Alaska pipeline. Now you see what they're doing is just fulfilling the promise that was made many years ago by Lenin when he said, first we're going to take over the land masses of Asia, then we're going to take over Europe, then we'll take the Africa and the other nations, and finally we will surround the United States of America. And when we've completely surrounded them, they'll drop into our laps without any fight. I think this is what they're planning on. I think they want to condition the American people to the point where we believe that it's hopeless to put up any struggle at all, and then they'll be able to come in and take over and we won't even put up a fight. I think this is one of the reasons why we hear so much on the news today is anti-defense. It almost gives us the idea that either one of 2 things, either that the Russians wouldn't fight and we don't have to worry about them, or that if a nuclear war came, there'd be no chance for us, so we better make the best kind of deal that we have now. So there is a very real danger. Also, there is a danger, and there is some evidence that they are thinking in the terms of an invasion force that would come under the ice flow in submarines and surface in the Hudson Bay and come down from that area. Now, if you're a student of Bible prophecy, there are 2 chapters of Scripture that are very interesting along this context. They have always been preached in the evangelical and fundamental churches, at least in recent years, that the 38th and 39th chapter of the book of Ezekiel is an attack against old Palestine. But they haven't read the Bible very carefully, because if you read that very carefully, you will notice that while there is an attack against old Palestine, there is some very interesting wording in there. It says, at the same time, that is while the attack is going on Palestine, thou shalt say in thy heart, talking about Russia now, let us go up to a land of unwalled villages where the people live in peace. Now, if you go up from Moscow, where do you go? You certainly don't end up in Palestine, do you? You go up across the northern, to the North Pole area, and you come right smack dab down through Canada, right into the Mississippi Valley area of the United States of America. Certainly you can't say that Palestine, that old Palestine, is a land of unwalled villages with no protection where the people live in peace. They're armed to the teeth over there. And then another interesting thing, it says they will come to take a prey of cattle. Do any of you have any idea how many head of cattle are in the Israeli nation at the present time? According to the 1972 census, 56,000 head of cattle in all of Israel. My gosh, we got more than that in the state of Missouri. More than 56 head of cattle. In fact, we got a lot of counties that have more than that. So it couldn't be talking about an invasion of Israel. This is what we've been told. But it's very, very interesting to see how the concept of what's building up now in the worldwide fits in very carefully with Bible prophecy. So if you're a student of Bible prophecy, it'd be well worth your time to look into that. I didn't mean to give a whole sermon on that, but it's quite interesting to look into it.
That situation, that question that was asked, seems to pose, I think, a lot of other interesting answers. I would visualize that if there were troops coming in like that, it would be an ideal military situation in which we would immediately start guerrilla action, and there'd be no question about this being illegal. We would start picking off the fringes of the enemy, their supply lines and so on. We'd be trying to capture their weapons and ammunition, at least their small arms. We'd be trying to get their food and supplies and denying them ours. Our civilian populations who are with us would be starting to hide, conceal their own food supplies and things like that, and we'd make life pretty unlivable for a lot of the enemy in that kind of a situation. So, to me, that's really a good situation in a way. I think we could really do a lot of damage, and if you realize what has been accomplished by guerrilla forces in Afghanistan with a very small population, smaller than most of our states, I guess, at least not as big as many of our single large states, with limited arms and ammunition, very limited training and education, but just a lot of guts. You could see the kind of damage that we could do in the United States to an invading force. We could take care of thousands of these people if we would quickly unite under our leaders and do a job. Now, the Army wouldn't probably lead that kind of a thing. We'd have to fall back on you civilian fighters, because that's where the fighters would really have a job to do. Are there any other questions? Yes?
Yeah, what kind of help can we get from the leaders of CPDL if the communications are going to be cut off and if some of the leaders are going to be assassinated right off the bat?
Well, I've had a certain amount of experience in that, and I can say this. In a wartime situation, we'll separate the sheep from the tigers in a hurry. There'll be lots of leaders that'll rise to the top, and we won't have to worry about who the leaders are. They'll appear. They're the fellas that will grab the guns and lead the troops with a little direction from some of the senior, more experienced people. They'll be there. Americans can fight. All we need is the will to do it.
May I
Sure.
say something? Do I have to? Can you?
Yeah, hold it down while you speak.
Yeah, it's okay. All right.
Yeah, hold that down while you speak.
No. You asked a question about communications. It's a very vital point and does represent a big question. Of course, you have the CB network. There's literally millions of these little gadgets all over the country. But they're not worth much as far as reliable distant communication is concerned. If you want to talk to point A, from point A to point B on a reliable day-to-day point, you can't do it over maybe a quarter mile. So that's no good. You have to have something better. It is recommended that each of you have at least a DX receiver, meaning a long-distance shortwave receiver. We should even start doing that now and have teams of people listening to overseas broadcasts. You are going to get better news overseas today than you will in the controlled media within the United States. You can even get some fairly decent news from countries that we think lean toward Russia. There may be some truth in what they say. We have to be intelligent enough and deductive-minded enough to know which is which. But at least if we gather those data, compile it, we can come up with pretty much what's going on. So we need at least DX receivers. Those of you who are amateur radio operators, keep on. Recognize that in a time of conflict, amateur radio is dead in the water. They deny you the authority, the right to utilize it. In a scenario of complete anarchy, you have a different story. Who is to tell you that you're not to operate it? So, those of you who have that equipment, keep it going. recognize that it is all open airways and subject to interception. Consequently, you must think in terms of doing anything you can to foil the enemy in knowing what you're saying. And I remember back in World War II, we were on a hill, we were in off face really, and it was kind of hilly country, and we were going down through this canyon. We emplaced up on the side of the hill, and it was on the far side of the hill, and the heavy guns couldn't reach us. They were going on down into the canyon, down below, but coming up this road, lo and behold, was a long column of tanks, all American tanks, and I looked over across the field on the other side, and I saw a tremendous number of German tanks. And I looked down, and lo and behold, there was little George Patton with the hatch open, and he was riding up on top, and he had his two old ivory pistols on him, ribbons from ear to ear, and congratulating everybody and all that kind of stuff. Quite a man. Anyway, I had a spare receiver. I tuned to the tank frequencies, and so I knew a battle was about to ensue. And I was on this side of the hill here in place, and you could see it out there, just across the road. And this fantastic tank battle took place, and the American troops used the foulest curse words you've ever heard in your life. They were vile. The graffiti on the bathroom walls and public places is nothing. But they all meant something. And they talked in this code, and the Germans didn't have the slightest idea what they were saying. So communications is important. You have to at least have receivers. You should think in terms of tube-type receivers, even though they take power. You should think in terms of having backup tube-type receivers in the multiple shortwave bands, so that in the event of an EMP of major proportions, the tubes are much more sturdy toward the EMP. However, because of power considerations and so forth, and because of cost considerations, you can purchase transistorized multi-band receivers quite economically. And I would recommend having that to use until the EMP knocks you off and you have to go revert to your tube. Does that answer your question?
The thing I was wondering about is, let's say they decide to hit Hayden Lake, and there's a news blackout. How do we even know what's going on? That's what I'm talking about. Or what if they assassinate a couple, three of the leaders, and it's a total blackout?
You can pretty well rest assured that it will be on the news media someplace. Maybe not here, but someplace. That's for the purpose of the DX receiver to get foreign broadcasts and come in with information from abroad.
The question on that, I should have come in on it, was how would news of the enemy action be known to others in the group? And this is what was the answer that you just heard. There was another question. Well, that gentleman there.
Before we answer that, could I just make this remark about this? During the Lebanon crisis, it was quite interesting to listen to the European news, which was telling a completely different story about what was happening in Lebanon than what the American news on television and radio was concerned. And if you can get these foreign broadcasts, many times, as Earl said, you can pick up some pretty good tidbits of information if you're able to do that.
That gentleman there.
I have a question for Jack and then one for Earl, please. Jack, first, is the intelligence telling us anything about possible nuclear terrorism as a kickoff point at the Olympics in Los Angeles? And second part of the question for Earl is, with the 4-inch cement slab on top of the bus, increase that protective measurement he gave us on that cement slab about 4 inches off the bus?
Okay, shall we take the second part of that question first? That question was about the the protection on top of the fallout shelter, the 4 inches, is that right? Got that? Okay.
Yes, 4 inches is that much more. Cement, of course, is a denser material than even compacted earth, and so it will have an additional protection per unit depth than even tanked earth. Obviously, if you could go down and get some roofer's lead, you know, just and put that in there too before you put that, would be great. I would certainly recommend thinking about that, even though it is kind of expensive. On a door or something, just that little old 1/8 inch roofer's lead for flashing around pipes on the roofs and so forth. You can nail that with roofing nails to a door, and it does a marvelous job for this. Remember also, when you design the entrance to anything, don't go straight in. Make right-angled turns, because you see those particles don't bend, and you'll have sky radiation fallout come down in the dust wherever it lights. That's where it's going to point of radiation. And what these things are small microscopic bullets. It is a physical thing that is tearing you up. You're just being riddled with a machine gun of small microscopic bullets, and your body eventually cannot take that any longer. And that's what destroys it. Okay?
Now, the second part of that question, I think, was what kind of intelligence do we have in the Los Angeles area at the present time?
In the Los Angeles area,
For the Olympics.
no, on the Olympic, very little that has come out. All we know is that the police force in the Los Angeles area is very much disturbed about some things that they have heard, that there are some indications that some of the underground organizations may be in operation during that period of time in the area, and also there is some information that possibly the Soviets may use this as a means of disrupting not only the Olympics, but also they are sort of looking for some shocking event to take place before the election, which will embarrass Mr. Reagan and throw the election over into the Democratic ranks. Also, quite a lot of evidence that if this does not happen, that sometimes between the election on the 4th of November and the 1st of the year may be the most dangerous period that this country has passed through in 150 years since the Civil War. So there are some indications. We haven't been able to get much out of the intelligence community about actual things that they might expect. But there have been some indications of terrorism in different parts of the country. For instance, in January, we got a report of a very large conventional type bomb in the subway of New York, and also a small nuclear device in the subway of New York. This is reported through channels. The FBI did absolutely nothing about it, but finally our informant was able to get through to the bomb squad chief in New York City, and he immediately began his search of the subway. It was supposed to be out in one of the unused sections of the subway, and they found a very large conventional bomb before it went off. Whether or not they ever found a nuclear device, we don't know, or whether there was one there. But we do know that there were 26 large bombs that went off in the city of New York during the month of January, and only 2 of them were reported in the news. One of them completely destroyed a Methodist church, a large, very, very old Methodist church building. It was completely wiped out. It was at nighttime. Nobody was hurt. Never hit the news at all. But there were 26 major bombing incidents in the city of New York, and all of them apparently coming through the underground and from terrorists. It wasn't some of these other individuals like Catholic bombing Protestant or Nazi bombing Jews or anything like that. It was apparently a terroristic type of a pattern.
Man in the yellow sweater.
Question for Mr. Jones. Regarding the EMP you mentioned, if you have a transistor radio in your shelter underground, would it be protected from the EMP force being underground? And secondly, could you do something to the electronic ignition in your vehicle, like perhaps wrap it in a sheet of lead, a sheet lead, something to protect the ignition of your vehicle from the EMP force?
I think you possibly all heard that question. This gentleman is asking what kind of protection would you have from a buried item from this electromagnetic pulse
Transistor radio.
on a transistor radio running.
Thank you. These are very, very good questions indeed. And where we, as a nation, first found out about this was on the end of the WETOC test, where we had airbursts in testing, evaluating the yield on nuclear heads. And we found that the power plants over in Hawaii, 2,000 miles away, were disrupted, the whole power grid, from this EMP. And it was at a fairly low altitude, where I don't know how high, it wasn't a tremendously high altitude, where it was detonated. Now, what happens here is a phenomena that, when you generate electricity, you generally just pull a wire. Of course, it's all coiled up on an armature or a rotor. You pull it through a magnetic flux field. And as that wire goes through the magnetic flux field, because of an old right-hand thumb rule that you learned in physics back in high school, you have an induced EMF in that wire because of the magnetic field. Well, in the case of an EMP, instead of the wire moving through the field of a magnet, it is a sheet magnet moving forward. It is a magnetized sheet, an impulse, that is quite powerful. And because, again, that right-hand rule, thumb rule, whenever it strikes a wire of any length, a railroad track, a power line, anything, an antenna on your automobile, that magnetic pulse goes by, and there's a voltage induced in that wire or the railroad track or whatever, and it is substantial in current. Short period, but it's substantial. All right, so that will knock out a transistor, which is a very fragile device. All right, so we have hardened our military equipment in the field to handle these things. But you and your transistor radio that you might buy at Radio Shack, that's not a hardened item. They don't think about that. They don't care. And obviously, and so what you have to do is the best you can to harden that piece of equipment. One of the things that I would recommend you do is, one, if you have a transistor in your house, you don't have to have the one that you listen to the news or whatever, the football game, every day. You're going to talk about the transistor radio that you're going to save your life and have communication with the world for. You buy that special if necessary. You wrap it up in aluminum foil, put it in an old metal bread box. You can go down to these yard sales for 25 cents and buy. And then, if even still, then if it is possible, and if you have a shelter, put it in the shelter. If you have a type receiver that has external antennas of any sort, remove the antennas and ground the antennas. Because then that EMP is driven to the ground, and obviously Mother Earth will disseminate this energy very, very rapidly. But even a few inches under the ground, there will be a current, and in that receiver, the little dinky wires, or even the printed, see that printed circuit board is a wire, whenever you see that copper on one. That is a wire, and that EMP strikes that wire and is enough to pop the IC or the transistors and so forth. So, two things, 2 points. One, protect your transistorized equipment. 2, where possible, and you can find, and really, you can go out and buy ham gear, believe it or not. I can buy you a complete ham station of, say, 250-watt transmitter, AM, FM, not FM, but AM single-side band, and CW, and a tube-type receiver that goes all the way from 540 up to 30 megacycles. I can buy the whole kit for $200 because they're no longer used. Hams all want the new Kenwoods and stuff like this. And they digital readouts. They just punch the frequency, synthesize the frequency systems, and they don't have to have VFOs and crystals and so forth. So you can buy this equipment very reasonable, but you have to have power plant. And so you're not going to have any of this stuff around, believe me. Okay?
And the electronic ignition of a vehicle.
No, I'm sorry, yes. Okay. There's two things you can do. Most Fords, for example, the entire drive mechanism is the same as it was for the old mechanicals. So you can go two approaches. Yank the distributor out and put an old mechanical in, or carry around in your trunk another one that is shielded, protected, wrapped up pretty good with aluminum foil and in a box, and hope for the best. But if you can go back to mechanical, I would recommend it.
Sir,
Just, I'll take you in a minute.
it's okay.
Pardon?
You never say whether the article's under cement.
Yes, I thought I answered that. Cement is a good attenuator, better than even dirt. It's a denser material.
Or the radio gear would be safe.
Yes, and the more the better. I mean, you get it underground, and then even then you want to ground your material the best you can. For example, you can get these 8-foot copperized rods for ground rods. The telephone companies use them and things like that. And even in a shelter, you can drive that on down into the ground and then shield, just take a ground strap and ground that to that if you are really in a close area where you expect a close-in burst. You follow what I'm saying?
Question back there.
On the electronic ignition for an automobile, if you not only wrap the tinfoil but wrap it in that lead you're talking about, the roof, would that protect it further?
Well, the lead, we're talking about two different phenomena. The lead is for the nuclear gamma radiation. The tin box is a Faraday shield that is grounding an electromagnetic pulse. Do you ever go under an underpass with your radio, well, either AM or FM, but particularly AM? You go under an underpass, and the radio station is not in the immediate area, how you just lose it and then it goes out the other side? Well, that's a Faraday shield that's overhead. Well, that is what you have to have, in effect, for this EMP type effect. And you can do this by shielding that equipment from it. But you have to have it grounded.
There's a question right up there in the front here.
Yes.
I understand there are commercially available and military model transceivers with frequency hop, and they're impossible to jam, monitor, or locate, although the prices are probably prohibitive.
Question is,
Just a comment, really.
yeah, okay. Yes, sir.
I wonder if Earl would care to comment on potassium iodide.
Oh, that's a very important question. The question is, what about this potassium iodide? Where does that fit into the civil defense program?
Thank you. I intended to mention this, and I, in a way, thought better about it because you're kind of practicing medicine. Creston T. Kearney, in his book, I'm going to go third man here, and he's practicing medicine. Creston T. Kearney, in his book, describes, I think it's on page 100 and 101 in that book, and incidentally, we have, I got just a little old diesel rabbit, and I brought a VCR and a TV and a projector and everything. I didn't have any more room to carry but just a few of Creston T. Kearney's books. And they're here for those of you who want them. But anyway, he describes the value of potassium iodide. It is a lifesaver. It had the people on the 20 kiloton yield bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the two Christian centers of Japan, by the way. Had they had potassium iodide, there would have been far fewer deaths. Another point involved there were shelters within 100 yards of ground zero where people lived. All right, now, this potassium iodide is a product that is a benign form of iodine that goes to your thyroid. Your thyroid is a gadget up here in your neck that soaks up iodine until it is saturated. Once it is saturated, it won't pick up anymore. Now, you can have it two ways. If you want the nuclear bomb to take the iodine that is radioactive and have your thyroid sop that up, it'll kill you. If you want to take the potassium iodide tablet and saturate your thyroid with that, then the radioactive iodide will not bother it because it won't enter it. Now there is a slight hitch, and this is the reason I didn't bring it up. There are very, very few people that there are adverse side effects. Number one. I don't know exactly what those adverse side effects are, but I don't think they're any worse than dying of radiation sickness. Two, women use potassium iodide tablets for weight control. And with the amount that you take for weight control, there are deleterious effects. And therefore, some officials use that as the crutch not to put it out. On the 3 Mile Island instance, they didn't even have any potassium iodide in the country in tablet form. They rapidly compressed some, sent them up to the 3 Mile Island, and the government didn't disseminate. The president has already given orders down to the state level that you can that potassium iodide can be disseminated at the state level. The states haven't done so either. You can, on your own, go out and get it. You can get it in two ways. I have an address here for you to mail off in tablet form. It's a little more expensive, but it's very adequate to do the job. And it can save your life. You can carry it in your purse. You can carry it in the glove compartment of your car, and so forth, in your travel bag, wherever you go. Now, that's more expensive, but it's very easy to use. The second form is very cheap, and you can save literally thousands of people's lives with it. And that is to go down to the drugstore and get potassium iodide in crystal form. And if you want to be a benefactor to your fellow man, I would recommend that you get at least 1 or 2 pounds of this in your immediate area, and you can save thousands of lives. What you do is you just put this potassium iodide in a little dark bottle, 60% solution, 60% of the potassium iodide, 40% water, shake like mad, and then when it'll dissolve completely because it's very hydroscopic. From there, you then dispense 2 drops on a little ball of bread and ball it up like you do when you used to go catching catfish where you found out you couldn't eat them. And just pop it down because it's kind of bitter. You can go either way, but I would, and that's cheap. You can buy it for about a pound of it for about $30. They try to get you hooked that you have to have a prescription for it, but go get a vet to get it for you, get a druggist to get it for you. Some doctors will go ahead and you tell them what you want it for, because it's not dangerous. Just if you just don't let some woman who is real weight control conscious start using it for weight control problems. And also, it might be wise to check a little bit, if you're worried about that, to see if there is any deleterious effect, and you might investigate what those are. But I think I'd rather die from potassium iodide overdose than I would the other way. At least I'd be taking my chances.
Earl, you talk about the pills.
Yeah, I did. I have the address.
When do you start taking them?
Oh, yes. You start taking these at the threat of a drop, and during the period of the threat of the drop.
How often?
Yes, 1 tablet a day.
Even infants can take it.
Yes. Sir?
Their deleterious effects have not been specified. We're not too...
They're really not anything bad. You get like a spacey feeling in your head if it's going to affect you abnormally, but your metabolism speeds up and you feel somewhat like on a speed, I guess on the drug speed. It doesn't hurt you. It's just a short-term effect that makes you feel spacey in the head. I'd also like to ask you, are you aware that the government has warehouses for your tackle of aloe vera juice and also an enzyme known as superoxide dismutase?
No, sir.
Yeah, they also will help protect against, well, radiation burns the aloe vera, and the superoxide dismutase works internally and protects the cells. Has to be injected.
You can't hear him back here.
This gentleman was giving some unlicensed prescription for burns, but I've heard that it has been effective with many people. And you can buy this aloe vera cream for burns at most of the health food stores. We don't want to get you in prison, you know. You run that risk too, huh? This unconstitutional government we have. Yes, please.
Yes, sir. It's 60% crystal potassium iodide and 40% water, and then shake until it's completely dissolved. And I was in error. Mary House brought this up. It's 4 drops per day for an adult and 2 drops per day for a infant less than 12 months.
Now I suggest that you tell them how is a practical way to get that 60% iodide and 40% water.
Well, you can just take a bottle, just look at it, and just a little bit over half, and fill it full of water, and get it.
Thank you.
Now it's interesting, too, that you can take this in liquid if you want to. It is kind of bitter. But if you want to get it down and you have a hard time swallowing a pill, just take that little piece of bread and coat it with margarine, and it slides right down real easy.
My suggestion would be that all of you folks get an initial supply of this stuff while it's still in the market.
Yes. I think this is most important. This potassium iodide, not only are you going to talk about saving your life, but you're talking about saving literally thousands of lives if you're in a position to be able to do so. And I think this, if you want to lay on hands, here you go.
That gentleman first, please.
On his book, he's got plans for a radiation meter you make out of a can. My question is there any way to get an original one of his pamphlets? Because what he's done was just reproduce it here, and the plans are too small. It's like you make it out of a pop can, and it's like going around.
The question was how to make a radiation meter, right? Following the directions given in Crescent County's book on nuclear war survival skills. Can you answer that, Earl?
I would recommend writing directly to Crescent P. Kearney, and up in the front of your book, you have that research bureau, Coos Bay, Oregon. Now, unfortunately, you see, back when he worked for Oak Ridge in Tennessee, they would disseminate that type of information. I don't know whether they would right today. But Crescent P. Kearney is a good man, and I'm sure that he would do it. I don't know the answer to that. Now, talking about that radiation detector, you can go that route, and again, if you're on a very, very limited beer budget, I would suggest you go ahead and do it. The accuracy and the reliability of that device is not as good as, say, you go off to Victorine and purchase one. And I know you can become equipped for less than the cost of a shotgun.
I'm going to volunteer a little information on this subject for those of you who may not know. You know, this matter of radiation, there are 2 factors involved. One is the existence of radiation and the strength of it at any particular moment in time. The other factor is how much is absorbed in a given period of time. Now, I remember as far back as about 30 years ago, the U.S. Army had a dosimeter which measured the amount which a soldier could put in his pocket and would measure the amount of radiation that his body absorbed. And when it reached a certain number of rems, he then began to approach a dangerous period, and he had to get out of the area, the highly exposed area. Now, this is different from the Geiger counter, which is a measurement of where the radiation is and how much it is at a particular moment in time. So there's two aspects of that. Now, maybe you would want to add something to that.
Mayor, as he pointed out, there's 2 points, 2 aspects to this. One is that there's a little dosimeter, but no much bigger than this, and a little charging box that electrostatically charges that tube in there. And you look at it up through the light, and it determines how much of a dose you have taken during the period of time you're out. You want to keep that down to an absolute minimum. The older a person gets, they already build a natural immunity to the gamma radiation because of their age. Because there's gamma radiation, you're getting pecked with it right now. All right, second, you want to keep the infants and young people, pregnant women, completely isolated. You're down in that hole and you don't have them out there for nothing. Now, that means that you send the old people out to do things because even 20 years, 30 years hence, they get cancer, big deal, are already dead. So that's the approach you have to do this. Your high-class thinking for your fellow man. Now, the other point here is that this Geiger counter type concept gives you right down to the background noise that is you're being radiated with right now. These pellets are coming down from the sun and outer space, and you're being bombarded, but at a very low rate. And that is calibrated. And from then on up, you can start telling when that fallout starts coming in, and when it starts coming in, that's when you get the and you just want to take a vacation from work. Don't worry about going to work. And that's the way you have to look at it.
Yes.
Yes, on the EMP, for a minute, anyone can answer this one. How long after the initial blast, the explosion, is that going to be affecting the radios and things?
The question is whether there's an EMP force, how long is that effective, and when will the effects of it be largely eliminated and no further problem?
Okay, it arrives practically instantaneous, speed of light type thing. It comes down very, very rapidly. It's not quite that fast, that's my knowledge, but it's measurable. But it's very, very rapid. And it's all over. Once the pulse is there, it's all over. Now, if you have another nuclear bomb somewhere else, then you have another EMP. So you have to be protected from this. That means this. When you take that transistor radio out of the box, out of the protection device, and you listen to the news and write down all the news and then disseminate it, you wrap it back up and get it unprotected as fast as you can and get it off the line. You see what I'm saying?
On a follow-up, excuse me, if I don't have the radio on, it's still effective?
Oh, yes. Yeah, you see, there's two different things. The power that is driving those transistors, which is the same as the vacuum tube, it's a little like audio amplifier or RF amplifier, whatever. That is one thing that makes the radio work as you want it to work. Okay, when you turn the switch on, that power is applied to those transistors, and it works. What you have here is an external power source, like that battery that is making that transistor work, only it's about maybe 5,000 times as strong, and it's too much for the transistor. You see what I'm saying? It's two power sources, one external and one internal.
Lady's way in the back there.
There's a lady in the back with a question.
I don't have a question, I have a comment.
Go ahead. ahead.
I'm in Earlwood, and for those who don't, I'll just say this is what my family does. That would be real nice to say. Okay, for a substitute for potassium iodide, there's several herbs you can use, especially in your situation where you might not be able to get anything. Okay, there's one herb called sodium alginate, and it's a real specific type of thing. The other one is Norwegian kelp, and it's used the same type of way, only a little bit more in the way of tablets. You use it just before and during the attack. This is what I share that.
Thank you. That kelp is good for you too, I hear.
Okay, say we're in the city now, and we're living a good 100 or 150 miles from work. We go underground. Is this Victor machine going to tell us when we can come out?
The question, as I get it, is that this gentleman is asking if there's a nuclear blast, far away, the explosion is far away, will the gadget tell you, the Geiger counter or its implement is equivalent, tell you when to come out? Yes, it will do that. I can answer that question directly. But you have to know at what level, of course, it is. You have to be able to read the Geiger counter. There's instructions for that. And of course, the other question is, how long are you coming out? If you're just coming out to get some something that you left in the house, let's say, short time, of course you can come out a lot sooner than if you want to go out and work for several hours. That's another problem. Because remember, the danger is, it's really a factor of the degree of radioactivity time multiplied by the length of time you're out there.
Has there been studies on how long that's going to last?
Yeah, that's very accurate studies.
Yeah, very accurate. And you see, as I pointed out earlier, that the decay of that gamma radiation from the fallout falls asymptotically straight down. It decays almost immediately, very rapidly, and then it stretches out, and at the end, it will last for some period of time. Now, of course, obviously, what they will do is they'll pop one, and a period of time later, they'll pop another one. And they'll keep that thing going. It is conceivable that you would still have your 2-week situation, your 2-week scenario. Certainly, you want to be prepared with water, food, medicines, etc., for at least a 2-week period in your shelter. There's no question about this. Even longer if you have it. I want to point out something to you on this food situation story. Not only for nuclear survival, but there is already an executive order that says that at any time T the President declares an emergency, you are hoarding if you have over 2 weeks' food for your family. And yet they will impose on you some people maybe from Chicago or something on this crack program, and you have to take care of them too on your 2 weeks' food. So you have to take this into account in your planning, where you put your food and all this kind of stuff.
I have an interesting experience with that one there. You know, I guess many of you people are farmers or have been farmers. And I found out from my experience in periods when food was a critical item that the farmers always had it. It didn't make any difference how many of the enemy came through and confiscated their stuff. The farmers always had some food. So the farmers are wise enough to get around the situation that Earl Jones just described here. They maintain adequate reserves no matter what happens. So a wise word to the wise is sufficient. And I think that goes for all of you folks. Food sources have to be protected one way or another. We have time for one more question.
We're going to get left.
Please.
I'd like to address one to Jack.
Sure.
If he can got some information about it. I have a couple of friends that are truckers, and they've been hauling a heck of a lot of heavy Army new equipment, such as earth movers, road graders, and so forth. Their information is that there's been something like 2,000 new road graders that the government has purchased, and 1,400 to 1,500 of great big earth movers, and just all at once. And they are hauling
not in one place, but the Army evidently is replenishing for something.
The question that has been asked is, what does General Mohr know about Army movement of heavy earth-moving equipment? Is there any special intelligence significance to that?
There have been, for at least 9 months that I know of, moving heavy equipment. This is bulldozers and road graders and this type of thing, and heavy earth movers have been moving to port of embarkation in the east, in the New York area. And nobody knows for sure where they're going. They think possibly they're going down into the southern part of Egypt or Sudan to be used for possibly some kind of a military operation in the Pacific Gulf area, or the Pacific, the Pacific Gulf, or not Pacific, but the Persian Gulf area. And there have been a very, very large movement from around Provo, Utah. A few months ago, we got a report from one of the men in the area there that he had counted 267 freight cars in one day moving this heavy equipment, and it was all headed towards the east. So it appears like they're getting ready for something, whether it's building airstrips or roads or this type of a thing. We do know also, for instance, along that same line, that there has been a new highway that has been built from the center of Mexico up to close to the American border, that has been built specifically to carry heavy equipment such as tanks. This has never come out in the American newspaper.
Go ahead. Or did you have anything more you want to say?
We thank you for your attention. If you like this kind of a program, if you think it's worthwhile and you'd like to have another one next year, if you'll let us know about it, we can, of course, broaden this out to other subjects as well. And in the past, we've had quite a lot of enthusiasm over this type of a program because it gives you a chance to participate and also to bring out some things that we normally don't get in the regular speaker's schedule. So if you like this type of a thing and would like to have more of them, just let us know about it. We'll see what we can do about it in the program next year. Now, our evening program will begin promptly at 7 o'clock, so those of you that are still here, we welcome you back this evening, and thank you very much for being with us today.
I have a few of these up here available if you need them. Mary Alice is right over here.